The unmarked grave sat beneath a weathered oak tree on the outskirts of Paso Robles, California, and the woman kneeling before it wept as though her heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces that could never be made whole again. Thomas Sullivan had been riding since dawn, his chestnut mare tired and dusty from the long trail between San Luis Obispo and his brother's ranch. The August heat of 1878 pressed down on everything like a heavy blanket, making even breathing feel like work. He had not expected to find anyone in this lonely stretch of land between the main road and the scattered homesteads that dotted the rolling hills. Yet there she was, her shoulders shaking with grief so profound that Thomas felt it in his own chest before he even dismounted. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She wore a simple dark blue dress, the hem dusty from the dry earth, and her auburn hair had come loose from its pins to fall around her face. A small bunch of wildflowers lay beside her on the ground, their petals already wilting in the afternoon sun. "Miss," Thomas said quietly, removing his hat, "are you all right?" She looked up, and Thomas found himself staring into the most beautiful pair of green eyes he had ever seen, even though they were red and swollen from crying. She could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old, and there was something in her face that spoke of both strength and devastating loss. "I am sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. "I did not think anyone would come by here." Thomas glanced at the grave. There was no marker, just a simple wooden cross that looked hastily made. Fresh dirt still showed where the ground had been recently disturbed. "No need to apologize for grief," Thomas said gently. "Loss is nothing to be ashamed of." The woman wiped at her eyes with trembling hands. "You are kind to say so. Most people in town think I should have moved on by now. It has been 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The grave was recent then." Thomas felt his heart constrict with sympathy. 3 weeks is no time at all," he said. "I lost my mother 5 years ago, and there are still days when the grief catches me by surprise." She looked at him with something like gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you. I am Clara Morrison. The woman buried here was my sister, Rebecca. She was only 19 years old." Thomas introduced himself, then asked, "What happened to her, if you do not mind my asking?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "Fever. It came on so suddenly. One day she was laughing and helping me in the garden, and 3 days later she was gone. The doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done, but I keep thinking if I had noticed sooner, if I had done something differently." "You cannot blame yourself for something beyond your control," Thomas said firmly. He crouched down beside her, his hat still in his hands. "I know it does not feel that way now, but you will drive yourself mad with those thoughts." "I know you are right," Clara whispered, "but she was all I had left in this world. Our parents died during the journey west 6 years ago. We came here with a wagon train, hoping for a fresh start. Rebecca and we only had each other, and now—" She broke off, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Thomas acted on instinct, reaching out to take her hand. She did not pull away. "Now you think you are alone," he said quietly, "but you are not. I do not know you, Clara Morrison, and you do not know me. But I am here right now, and I am telling you that you do not have to carry this grief by yourself. No one should mourn alone." Clara looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was a tall man, probably in his mid-20s, with dark brown hair and kind blue eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. There was something solid about him, something steady and reassuring. "Why would you care about a stranger's pain?" she asked. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone in grief," Thomas said simply. "And because I cannot ride away and leave you here crying without at least offering whatever comfort I can give." They sat in silence for a moment. the only sounds the whisper of wind through the oak tree's branches and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Thomas did not let go of her hand, and Clara found herself drawing strength from that simple touch. "Tell me about her," Thomas said. "Tell me about Rebecca." And so Clara did. She spoke of her sister's laugh, which had been bright and infectious. She told him how Rebecca had loved to sing while doing chores, even though she could not carry a tune to save her life. She described her sister's dreams of opening a dress shop in town, how she had been saving every penny from her work at the general store to make that dream come true. Thomas listened to it all, asking questions, encouraging Clara to share her memories. And slowly, as the afternoon shadows grew longer, he watched some of the desperate grief in her eyes transform into something softer, something that looked almost like peace. "I come here every day," Clara admitted as the sun began to sink lower in the sky. "I know I should probably start trying to build a life again, but I cannot seem to make myself care about anything anymore." "You will care again," Thomas assured her. "It just takes time. But Clara, I meant what I said before. You should not have to mourn alone. Would you let me come visit you? I am staying at my brother's ranch just 5 miles from here for the next few months while I help him expand his herd. I could come by every few days if you would like the company." Clara studied him carefully. She had learned to be cautious around men after several uncomfortable encounters in town. Men who had seen 2 young women without family protection as easy targets. But there was nothing predatory in Thomas Sullivan's gaze, nothing that made her feel unsafe. He looked at her with genuine compassion and concern. "I would like that," she said finally. "I live in the small white house just off Main Street, the one with the green shutters. I take in sewing and mending to support myself now." "Then I will come by tomorrow afternoon if that suits you," Thomas said. He stood and offered her his hand, helping her to her feet. "Let me walk you back to town. It will be dark soon." Clara gathered her shawl and the wilted wildflowers, placing them gently on the grave. "Goodbye, Rebecca," she whispered. "I will be back tomorrow." As they walked together toward Paso Robles, Clara found herself telling Thomas more about her life. She explained how she and Rebecca had worked together to build a modest but respectable life in California. How they had been planning to save enough money to buy a small plot of land where they could build a real home instead of renting rooms. "Those dreams do not have to die with her," Thomas said as they approached the edge of town. "You could still make them happen." "It feels wrong to think about the future when she will never have one," Clara said softly. "It would be wrong not to," Thomas countered. "The best way to honor those we have lost is to live fully, to chase the dreams that mattered to both of you. Do you think Rebecca would want you to give up on everything you both worked toward?" Clara thought about this. She remembered her sister's fierce determination, her optimism even in the hardest times. "No," she admitted. "Rebecca would tell me to stop feeling sorry for myself and get back to living." "Then maybe you should listen to her," Thomas said with a gentle smile. They had reached Clara's house, a small but tidy dwelling with freshly painted shutters and a neat front garden that showed signs of careful tending, though it had been somewhat neglected in recent weeks. "Thank you," Clara said, turning to face him. "You have given me more comfort today than anyone has in the past 3 weeks. I do not know why you stopped to help a stranger, but I am grateful you did." "I will see you tomorrow," Thomas promised. He put his hat back on and tipped it to her before heading back toward where he had left his horse. Clara watched him go, feeling something she had not felt since Rebecca's death. It was small and fragile, but it was there nonetheless. Hope. True to his word, Thomas appeared at her door the following afternoon. He had cleaned up since the previous day, his shirt freshly laundered and his dark hair still damp from washing. He carried a basket covered with a cloth. "My sister-in-law sent these," he explained when Clara opened the door. "She heard about your loss and wanted to offer her condolences. She said no one should have to worry about cooking when they are grieving." Inside the basket were fresh bread, a jar of preserves, cold chicken, and apple tarts. Clara felt tears spring to her eyes again, but these were different from the desperate tears she had shed at the grave. "Please thank her for me," Clara said, accepting the basket, "and tell her that her kindness means more than she knows." "You can tell her yourself if you like," Thomas said. "She asked if you would consider coming to dinner at the ranch this Sunday. She said it would do you good to be around people who care." Clara hesitated. She had isolated herself since Rebecca's death, unable to bear the pitying looks and awkward condolences from the townspeople who had never really understood her and her sister anyway. "I do not know," she said. "I am not sure I am ready for that." "No pressure," Thomas said easily, "but the invitation stands. My brother Jack and his wife Sarah are good people. They would make you feel welcome." They sat on Clara's small front porch, and Thomas told her about his life. He explained that he had been working on ranches throughout California for the past 7 years, saving money to eventually buy his own land. His brother had established a successful cattle operation near Paso Robles 3 years ago and had invited Thomas to partner with him. "I was heading to his ranch when I came across you yesterday," Thomas said. "I had been in San Luis Obispo settling some business matters. Seems like fate that I took the back road instead of the main trail." "You believe in fate?" Clara asked. Thomas considered this. "I believe that sometimes we end up exactly where we need to be, even if we do not understand why at the time." Over the following weeks, Thomas became a regular presence in Clara's life. He visited her nearly every day, sometimes bringing food from Sarah, other times bringing small gifts like a book he thought she might enjoy or a ribbon for her hair. They would sit on her porch and talk for hours, and slowly Clara found herself looking forward to his visits more than anything else in her days. She still went to Rebecca's grave every morning, but the visits grew shorter, and the tears came less frequently. Thomas accompanied her sometimes, standing quietly by her side as she spoke to her sister about her day, about the memories that surfaced, about the slow process of learning to live with loss. "I think she would have liked you," Clara told him one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Rebecca always said I needed someone steady in my life. She used to tease me about being too serious." "You have every reason to be serious," Thomas said. "You have faced more hardship than most people twice your age." "That is true for many people who came west," Clara pointed out. "Everyone here has a story of loss." "That does not make yours any less valid," Thomas said. He reached out and took her hand, something he had started doing more frequently. Each time he did, Clara felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with the growing feelings she could no longer deny. She had fallen in love with Thomas Sullivan. It had happened gradually, so slowly that she had not noticed it at first, but now it was undeniable. She loved the way he listened to her, really listened, without trying to fix everything or tell her how to feel. She loved his quiet strength, his gentle humor, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She loved that he had seen her at her lowest moment and had not turned away. "Thomas," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. "What is it?" "I think I am falling in love with you," Clara said, her heart pounding. "I know it has only been 6 weeks since we met, and I know I probably should not be thinking about such things when I am still mourning my sister. But I cannot help how I feel, and I do not want to hide it from you." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, and Clara felt panic rising in her chest. She had made a terrible mistake. She had misread his kindness for something more. She had ruined everything. But then Thomas smiled, a smile so warm and genuine that it took her breath away. "Clara," he said, squeezing her hand, "I have been in love with you since the day I found you at that grave. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you or make you feel uncomfortable. But if you are telling me you feel the same way, then I am the happiest man in California right now." Clara laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised her. She had not thought she would ever laugh like that again. "I do feel the same way," she said. "I love you, Thomas Sullivan." "And I love you, Clara Morrison," he said. Then he leaned in and kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Clara felt as though she could breathe properly for the first time since Rebecca had died. The grief was still there, would always be there in some form, but it no longer consumed her entirely. There was room now for other feelings, for love and hope, and the tentative joy of imagining a future. "Rebecca would be happy about this," Clara said, resting her head on Thomas's shoulder. "She always wanted me to find someone who would take care of me." "I will take care of you," Thomas promised, "and I will never let you mourn alone again. Whatever grief comes in life, we will face it together." They sat together on the porch as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and Clara felt something shift inside her. She would always miss Rebecca, would always carry that loss with her. But she could also move forward, could build a life that honored her sister's memory while also embracing new love and new possibilities. The next morning, Clara accepted Sarah's invitation to Sunday dinner at the ranch. Thomas came to fetch her in a wagon, and as they rode out toward the Sullivan property, Clara felt nervous but also excited. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to be part of a community, to let people in. The Sullivan ranch was larger than Clara had expected, with a sprawling house that had clearly been expanded over the years and several well-maintained outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see horses in a nearby corral. It spoke of prosperity and hard work, and Clara felt a pang of something that felt almost like longing. Sarah Sullivan came out to greet them before they had even reached the house. She was a petite woman with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile that immediately put Clara at ease. "You must be Clara," Sarah said, taking both of Clara's hands in hers. "I am so glad you could come. Thomas has told us so much about you." Clara glanced at Thomas, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I hope he said good things." "Only the best," Sarah assured her. "Come inside. Jack is just finishing up some work in the barn, but he will join us shortly." The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the smells of cooking food and fresh flowers. Sarah led Clara into a cheerful kitchen where a pot of stew simmered on the stove and fresh bread cooled on the counter. "Can I help with anything?" Clara offered. "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly. "You are our guest. Besides, everything is nearly ready. Just sit and keep me company while I finish up." As they talked, Clara learned that Sarah and Jack had been married for 4 years and had a 2-year-old daughter named Emma who was currently napping. Sarah had come west with her parents, who had established a farm in the area before her father's health had forced them to return east. She had stayed behind, having fallen in love with both the land and Jack Sullivan. "Thomas tells me you do sewing and mending," Sarah said. "Are you good with children's clothes? I have been trying to make some new dresses for Emma, but I am terrible with a needle." "I would be happy to help," Clara said. "In fact, if you have the fabric, I could make the dresses for you. It would give me something to do with my hands." "That would be wonderful," Sarah said warmly, "but only if you let me pay you properly for your work." They were interrupted by the arrival of Jack Sullivan, who looked remarkably like his brother, though he was a bit stockier and had more weathered features from years of outdoor work. He greeted Clara kindly, and soon they were all seated around the large dining table. The meal was delicious, and the conversation flowed easily. Jack told stories about some of the challenges he had faced building up the ranch, and Sarah shared amusing anecdotes about life in Paso Robles. Clara found herself relaxing, laughing at Jack's jokes and adding her own observations about the town and its characters. After dinner, little Emma woke from her nap and toddled into the dining room, her blonde curls tousled and her cheeks pink with sleep. She went straight to her father, who scooped her up with practiced ease. "Emma, this is Miss Clara," Jack said. "Can you say hello?" Emma buried her face shyly in her father's shoulder, then peeked out at Clara with bright blue eyes. "Hello, Emma," Clara said gently. "It is very nice to meet you." Emma stared at her for a moment, then reached out with one chubby hand toward the small locket Clara wore around her neck. "Pretty," Emma said. "Thank you," Clara said, touching the locket. Inside was a small portrait of Rebecca, the only image she had of her sister. "It was a gift from someone very special to me." As the afternoon wore on, Clara felt a deep sense of contentment settling over her. This was what Rebecca had always wanted for her, this sense of belonging, of being part of a family. And while Clara knew she would never stop missing her sister, she could also see now that her life did not have to end just because Rebecca's had. On the ride back to town, Thomas reached over and took Clara's hand. "You looked happy today," he said. "It was good to see." "I was happy," Clara admitted. "Your family is wonderful. Sarah asked me to make some dresses for Emma, and I think I might actually enjoy doing it." "Sarah has a way of bringing people into the fold," Thomas said with affection. "She did the same thing for me when I first arrived. Made me feel like I belonged here." Clara looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you think you will stay in Paso Robles permanently, or is this just another stop before you move on?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, guiding the wagon around a curve in the road. "I have been thinking about that a lot lately," he said. "I always figured I would keep moving, keep working toward having my own place somewhere. But being here, helping Jack with the ranch, and especially meeting you, it has made me realize that maybe what I have been looking for is not a place but people to share it with." "What are you saying?" Clara asked, her heart beginning to race. Thomas pulled the wagon to a stop on the side of the road and turned to face her fully. "I am saying that I want to stay here, Clara. I want to build a life in Paso Robles with you if you will have me. I know it is fast, and I know you are still healing from losing Rebecca. But I also know that what we have is real and worth fighting for." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "I want that too," she said. "I want to build a life with you, Thomas. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I do not have to face the day alone." "You will never be alone again," Thomas promised. "I told you that the day we met, and I meant it. Whatever comes, we will face it together." He kissed her then, and Clara felt the last pieces of her broken heart begin to knit back together. The scar would always be there, the place where Rebecca's loss had torn her apart. But scars were part of living, part of surviving. And Clara was ready to start truly living again. The weeks turned into months, and Clara and Thomas's relationship deepened. Thomas spent his days working on the ranch with Jack, helping to expand the cattle operation and improve the property. In the evenings, he would come to town and spend time with Clara, often staying for dinner, or taking her for walks through the countryside as the weather cooled into autumn. Clara threw herself into her sewing work, taking on more clients and discovering that she had a real talent for design. Sarah spread the word among the other ranch wives, and soon Clara had more work than she could handle. She hired another woman from town, a widow named Mrs. Peterson, to help with the simpler alterations, and together they turned Clara's small house into a thriving business. Every Sunday, Clara and Thomas visited Rebecca's grave together. Thomas had helped her install a proper headstone, a beautiful piece of carved marble that bore Rebecca's name and the dates of her short life. Clara would tell her sister about the week's events, about the dresses she had made, and the places Thomas had taken her. She told Rebecca about falling in love, about the plans they were making for the future. "I know you would love him," Clara said one Sunday morning as she placed fresh flowers at the grave. "He is everything you always said I needed, patient and kind and steady. He makes me feel safe." Thomas stood a respectful distance away, giving Clara her private moment with her sister. When she was finished, she came to his side and took his hand. "Thank you for doing this with me every week," she said. "I know it cannot be easy, spending your Sunday mornings in a cemetery." "I want to be here," Thomas said simply. "Rebecca was important to you, which makes her important to me. Besides, I like hearing your stories about her. It helps me feel like I know her a little bit." As Christmas approached, Thomas began acting nervous and distracted. Clara noticed but did not press him, figuring he would tell her what was on his mind when he was ready. She was busy with holiday orders anyway, making special dresses and fancy shirts for the town's celebration. On Christmas Eve, Thomas invited Clara to the ranch for dinner. The house was decorated with pine boughs and candles, and Emma ran around excitedly in a new red dress that Clara had made for her. After a festive meal, Jack and Sarah excused themselves to put Emma to bed, leaving Thomas and Clara alone by the fireplace. "I have something for you," Thomas said, reaching into his pocket. He looked more nervous than Clara had ever seen him. "Thomas, you did not need to get me anything," Clara protested, though she felt a flutter of anticipation. "This is not just a gift," Thomas said. He pulled out a small velvet box and got down on one knee, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Clara Morrison," Thomas said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. "These past 5 months with you have been the best of my life. You have shown me what it means to be truly brave, to keep going even when your heart is broken. You have taught me about strength and resilience, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, supporting you, and making sure you never have to face anything alone again. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the firelight and sparkled like a star. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Thomas, I will marry you." Thomas slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her with all the love and passion he had been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. Jack and Sarah came back into the room, clearly having been listening from the hallway, and offered their congratulations. Sarah hugged Clara tightly. "Welcome to the family," she said. "I could not be happier." They celebrated with cake and coffee, making plans for the wedding. Clara wanted something simple, just close friends and family, and they decided on a spring wedding that would give them time to make proper preparations. That night, as Thomas drove Clara back to town, she looked at the ring on her finger and felt a profound sense of peace. "I wish Rebecca could be here for the wedding," she said softly. "She will be," Thomas said. "Not in the way you would like, but she will be there in spirit. And Clara, I truly believe she would be happy for you, for us." "I know she would," Clara agreed. "She always wanted me to find someone who would love me the way you do." The winter passed in a flurry of wedding preparations. Clara designed her own wedding dress, a beautiful creation of ivory silk and delicate lace that made Sarah gasp when she saw it. She also made dresses for Sarah and little Emma, who would serve as flower girl. Thomas and Jack worked on building an addition to Clara's house, expanding it so that it would be suitable for a married couple. They added a larger bedroom and a proper parlor, and Jack surprised them by installing new windows that let in more light. "This is too much," Clara protested when she saw all the work they had done. "Nonsense," Jack said. "You are family now. Besides, Thomas has been working himself to the bone on the ranch. This is the least I can do." As spring arrived, the countryside around Paso Robles burst into bloom. Wildflowers covered the hills in carpets of gold and purple, and the air smelled of fresh grass and possibility. Clara found herself waking each morning with a sense of excitement she had not felt in years. The week before the wedding, Clara visited Rebecca's grave alone for the first time in months. She sat beside the headstone and talked to her sister as she had so many times before. "I am getting married," she said, though of course Rebecca already knew. "To Thomas Sullivan, the cowboy who found me here crying all those months ago. He is a good man, Rebecca. The kind of man you always said I deserved. I wish you could meet him properly, wish you could be at the wedding standing beside me, but I feel you with me anyway in my heart." She placed a bouquet of wildflowers on the grave, the same kind she had brought that very first day. "I am going to be happy," Clara continued. "I am going to build a life with Thomas, and maybe someday we will have children who I will tell all about their Aunt Rebecca. Your memory will live on through me, through the stories I tell and the love I carry for you. You will never be forgotten." The wind rustled through the oak tree's branches, and for just a moment, Clara could have sworn she felt a hand on her shoulder, warm and comforting. She smiled through her tears. "Thank you for being my sister," she whispered. "Thank you for all the years we had together, even though they were not enough. I love you, Rebecca. I will always love you." When she stood to leave, Clara felt lighter than she had in a year. The grief was still there, would always be there in some measure, but it no longer weighed her down. She could carry it now along with all the other emotions that made up a full life. Joy and anticipation, love and hope, gratitude for what had been and excitement for what was to come. The wedding took place on a beautiful Saturday in April of 1879. The ceremony was held at the small church in Paso Robles, with the reception at the Sullivan Ranch. Clara walked down the aisle alone, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers mixed with white roses. She had considered asking Jack to give her away, but in the end, she decided to walk alone, a symbol of the journey she had made from grief to new beginnings. Thomas waited for her at the altar, looking handsome in a new suit that Clara had tailored specifically for him. When she reached his side, he took her hand and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed Clara with such tenderness that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. The reception was a joyful affair, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. The people of Paso Robles who had watched Clara struggle through her grief now celebrated her happiness. Even Mrs. Peterson, Clara's sewing assistant, got up and made a speech about how proud she was of the young woman who had built a successful business from nothing. As the sun began to set, Thomas led Clara away from the celebration for a moment of privacy. They stood together on a hill overlooking the ranch, the golden light painting everything in warm hues. "Are you happy?" Thomas asked, his arms around her waist. "I am happier than I ever thought I could be again," Clara said honestly. "When Rebecca died, I thought happiness was something that had died with her, but you showed me that we can carry our grief and still find joy. You showed me that love does not replace what we have lost, but adds something new and precious. You are the one who taught me about real courage," Thomas said. watching you face your grief head-on, watching you slowly heal and open your heart again, that took more bravery than anything I have ever done." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Clara felt utterly content. This was where she was meant to be, in the arms of the man who had promised she would never mourn alone again, the man who had kept that promise every single day. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, as all first years are, but Clara and Thomas navigated it with patience and love. They learned each other's habits and quirks, discovered how to fight fair and make up even better. Clara continued her sewing business, which thrived under her creative direction, while Thomas became a full partner in the ranch with Jack. Clara still visited Rebecca's grave regularly, though not every day as she once had. Sometimes Thomas came with her, other times she went alone. On what would have been Rebecca's 21st birthday, Clara brought a cake and sat beside the grave, telling her sister about everything that had happened. "I think you would be proud of me," Clara said. "I know you would love Thomas, and the business is doing so well, Rebecca. We made it, just like we always planned. I wish you were here to see it, but I like to think you know somehow." That evening, Thomas found Clara sitting quietly on their porch, staring out at the sunset. "Hard day?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Not hard exactly," Clara said. "Just thinking about Rebecca, about how much she is missing. She should have had so much more time." "I know," Thomas said, pulling her close. "It is not fair that she was taken so young, but Clara, you are living enough for both of you. Every dress you create, every smile you share, every moment of happiness you experience, that is honoring her memory." "I hope so," Clara said. "I really hope so." In the spring of 1880, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of emotions: joy and fear, excitement and grief. She wished desperately that Rebecca could be there to share this experience with her. Thomas was overjoyed, though he tried to contain his enthusiasm when he saw how overwhelmed Clara was. "What if something goes wrong?" Clara asked him one night as they lay in bed. "What if I lose the baby like I lost Rebecca?" "We cannot live our lives in fear of what might happen," Thomas said gently. "I know you are scared, and that is completely understandable. But we have to trust that everything will be all right." Sarah was a tremendous support during Clara's pregnancy, sharing her own experiences and offering practical advice. She helped Clara prepare the nursery, sewing baby clothes and teaching her how to knit tiny booties. "You are going to be a wonderful mother," Sarah assured her. "I can already see it." As Clara's belly grew, she found herself talking to the baby the same way she had talked to Rebecca. She would sit in the rocking chair Thomas had made and tell stories about her sister, about the two young women who had crossed the country together and built a life in California. "Your Aunt Rebecca was the bravest person I ever knew," Clara would say, her hands resting on her stomach. "And even though you will never meet her, she will always be a part of our family." In November of 1880, Clara went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara was certain something terrible was about to happen. But Thomas stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her, and when the sun rose on a new day, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Robert Thomas Sullivan, the first name a masculine version of Rebecca's name, and Clara wept with joy as she held her son for the first time. "He is perfect," Thomas said, his voice choked with emotion. "You did it, Clara. You brought our son into the world." "I wish Rebecca could see him," Clara said through her tears. "I think she does," Thomas said softly. "I think she is watching over all of us." The first few months of motherhood were exhausting and overwhelming, but Clara discovered that she loved being a mother. Little Robert, whom they called Robbie, was a content baby with Thomas's blue eyes and Clara's auburn hair. Clara would often take him to visit Rebecca's grave, holding him as she told her sister all about his latest developments. "He smiled at me today," Clara told Rebecca when Robbie was 2 months old. "A real smile, not just gas. You would have loved him so much, Rebecca. I know you would have been the best aunt." As Robbie grew, Clara made sure to tell him about the aunt he would never meet. She showed him the locket with Rebecca's picture and told him stories about her laugh, her kindness, her dreams for the future. Rebecca became a presence in their home, not a ghost of sadness, but a beloved memory woven into the fabric of their family. Thomas's relationship with Jack continued to flourish, and the ranch prospered. They expanded their cattle operation and purchased additional land, building the Sullivan Ranch into one of the most successful in the area. Thomas credited much of their success to Jack's business sense and his own willingness to work harder than anyone else. "We are building something that will last," Thomas told Clara one evening as they watched Robbie play on the floor. "Something we can pass down to our children and grandchildren." "Our children," Clara said with a smile. "Are you already planning for more?" "Only if you want them," Thomas said. "But I would not object to giving Robbie a little brother or sister." 2 years later, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Rebecca, after Thomas's sister-in-law and Clara's beloved sister. The little girl was a spirited child from the start, with a strong will and an infectious laugh that reminded Clara so much of Rebecca that it sometimes took her breath away. "It is like she has your sister's spirit," Thomas observed when Sarah Rebecca was about 6 months old. "Look at how determined she is." Clara watched her daughter trying to grab a toy just out of reach, refusing to give up until she succeeded. "Rebecca was like that," she said. "Once she decided she wanted something, nothing could stop her. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm." The sewing business continued to thrive, though Clara scaled back her hours to focus on the children. She trained 2 more assistants and eventually turned the day-to-day operations over to Mrs. Peterson, though she still designed special pieces and took on challenging projects that interested her. The Sullivan Ranch grew into a major operation, employing several ranch hands and shipping cattle as far as San Francisco. Jack and Sarah had 2 more children, and the cousins grew up together, running wild across the ranch land and creating the kind of childhood memories that would last a lifetime. Clara still visited Rebecca's grave, though now it was often with her children in tow. She would tell them stories about their aunt, keeping Rebecca's memory alive for a new generation. "Why did Aunt Rebecca have to die?" Robbie asked one day when he was about 7 years old. Clara considered the question carefully. "Sometimes people die before we are ready to let them go," she said. "It is not fair and it is not right, but it is part of life. The important thing is that we remember them, that we keep their love alive in our hearts." "Do you still get sad about it?" Sarah Rebecca asked, holding her mother's hand. "Sometimes," Clara admitted, "but I also have so much happiness in my life now. I have your father and I have you and Robbie. Aunt Rebecca would want me to be happy and I am. I think that is the best way I can honor her memory." The years passed, marked by both joys and sorrows, as is true for all lives. Clara's business became one of the most respected in the county, known for quality and craftsmanship. Thomas and Jack's ranch thrived through good years and bad, their brotherhood and partnership proving unshakable. Robbie grew into a serious young man who loved working with horses, showing the same patience and skill with animals that his father possessed. Sarah Rebecca inherited her mother's creative talent and her namesake aunt's determination, and by the time she was 15, she was already making beautiful dresses that rivaled anything Clara had created. In 1895, when Clara was 39 years old and had been married to Thomas for 16 years, They welcomed a surprise late addition to their family. Twin boys they named James and William. The twins brought a new energy to the household, and Clara found herself experiencing motherhood all over again, this time with the wisdom that came from having raised 2 children already. "I never thought we would be starting over with babies at our age," Thomas said one night as he rocked James while Clara nursed William. "Life is full of surprises," Clara said with a smile. "Good ones and bad ones. We have had our share of both." "No regrets, though?" Thomas asked. Clara thought about this, thought about all the years since that day Thomas had found her weeping at Rebecca's grave. She thought about the grief that had nearly consumed her, about the slow healing that had come through love and patience and time. "No regrets," she said firmly. "I wish Rebecca could have been here for all of it, wish she could have known you and our children. I will always wish that. But I am grateful for the life we have built, Thomas. You kept your promise. I have never had to mourn alone." "And you never will," Thomas promised, just as he had promised so many years ago. As the children grew and eventually started their own lives, Clara and Thomas's love only deepened. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had built a life of substance and meaning, creating a legacy that honored both the living and the dead. Robbie married a teacher from town and took over management of the ranch with his cousin Emma's husband. Sarah Rebecca opened her own dress shop in San Francisco, fulfilling the dream that her Aunt Rebecca had once had. The twins showed promise of following in their father's footsteps, natural horsemen with a love for the land. Clara and Thomas grew old together, their love maturing like fine wine. They would sit on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the rolling hills of California, and talk about everything and nothing. "Do you remember the day we met?" Clara asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "How could I forget?" Thomas said. "The most beautiful woman I had ever seen, crying her heart out under an oak tree. I knew in that moment that my life was about to change. I was so broken," Clara remembered. "I thought I would never be whole again." "But you were not broken," Thomas corrected gently. "You were grieving, which is different. You were feeling the full weight of love and loss, which is what makes us human." They still visited Rebecca's grave together, though now they moved more slowly and needed to rest more often. Clara would place flowers on the headstone and update her sister on family news, telling her about grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of love and resilience. "I think she would be proud," Thomas said one day as they stood together at the grave. "I know she would," Clara agreed. "We built a good life, Thomas. A life full of love and family and purpose. That is all Rebecca ever wanted for me." In the spring of 1910, Clara and Thomas celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The gathering at the ranch was loud and chaotic and perfect, filled with laughter and love. As Clara looked around at all the faces, at the family that had grown from the love she and Thomas shared, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life had not been easy. There had been losses and setbacks, disappointments and heartaches. But there had also been so much beauty, so much joy, so much love. That night, as she and Thomas prepared for bed, Clara caught sight of herself in the mirror. She was 66 years old, her auburn hair now streaked with white, her face lined with the evidence of a life fully lived. She looked at the locket she still wore around her neck, the one with Rebecca's picture inside. "I kept my promise to you too," she whispered to her long-gone sister. "I kept living. I found love and built a family. I made our dreams come true, even if you could not be here to see it." Thomas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Talking to Rebecca?" he asked gently. "Always," Clara said with a smile. "She is still such a big part of who I am." "And she always will be," Thomas said. "That is the beautiful thing about love. It does not die when people do. It lives on in the people they loved, in the memories we carry, in the lives we build." As they climbed into bed, Clara snuggled close to Thomas, grateful as she was every night for the warmth of his presence beside her. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Thomas asked. "For stopping that day," Clara said. "For seeing me at my worst and not turning away. For promising I would never mourn alone again and keeping that promise every single day since. For building this life with me. For everything." Thomas kissed her forehead. "Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life, Clara Sullivan. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They drifted off to sleep together, two people who had found each other in the midst of grief and built something beautiful from the ashes of loss. Their love story was not one of fairy tale romance or effortless happiness. It was real and messy and complicated, built on a foundation of shared pain and mutual understanding, strengthened by years of choosing each other every single day. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes that come with time. Jack passed away in 1915, and Thomas mourned the loss of his brother deeply. But he did not mourn alone. Clara was there beside him, just as he had been there for her all those years ago at Rebecca's grave. They understood that grief was not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be moved through together. Sarah, Thomas's sister-in-law and Clara's dear friend, followed her husband 2 years later. At the funeral, Clara held Thomas's hand and thought about how life was a constant cycle of love and loss, joy and sorrow. The key was not to avoid the pain but to embrace it as part of the full human experience. Their own health began to decline as they moved into their 70s, but they faced it together with the same partnership that had defined their marriage. When Thomas developed problems with his heart, Clara was there to make sure he took his medicine and did not overwork himself. When Clara's eyesight began to fail, Thomas read to her every evening, his voice bringing the words to life. "We are getting old," Clara observed one evening with a wry smile. "We are getting old together," Thomas corrected. "That is all that matters." In the summer of 1920, Clara and Thomas took one last trip to Rebecca's grave. Thomas was too weak to make the journey often anymore, and Clara's mobility was limited, but they were determined to go together one final time. Clara placed flowers on the headstone, now weathered by 42 years of sun and rain, and told Rebecca about her life, about all the years that had passed since that first terrible day of grief. "I am 76 years old now," Clara said. "Can you believe it? I never thought I would live this long, especially not in those dark days after you died. But I did live, Rebecca. I lived fully and completely, just like you would have wanted. I fell in love with the most wonderful man, and we built a beautiful family together. 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren so far. They all know about you. Your memory lives on in every one of them." She paused, and Thomas squeezed her hand. "I am tired now," Clara continued. "My body is wearing out, and I know my time is getting short. But I am not afraid. I have lived a good life, a full life, and when I come to join you, I will have so many stories to tell you about everything you missed." Thomas helped her stand, and together they made their way slowly back to the wagon. As they drove away, Clara looked back one last time at the grave under the oak tree, the place where her life had fallen apart and then, miraculously, begun to come back together. "No regrets?" Thomas asked, echoing the question he had asked so many times over the years. "No regrets," Clara confirmed. "Only gratitude." Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep on a cool October morning in 1921, with Thomas holding her hand and their children gathered around her bed. Her last words were about how beautiful the sunset had been the evening before, how grateful she was for every moment she had been given. Thomas lived for 2 more years, cared for by his children, and sustained by the memories of his life with Clara. He visited her grave every week, placed right next to Rebecca's under the old oak tree, and told her about the family news, about the grandchildren who were getting married and the great-grandchildren who were being born. "I kept my promise," he would tell her. "You never mourned alone. We faced everything together, just like I said we would." When Thomas died in the spring of 1923, he was buried beside Clara, completing a trinity of graves under the oak tree. The headstone stood as testament to 3 lives intertwined by love and loss. Rebecca Morrison, who died too young but whose memory lived on through those who loved her. Clara Sullivan, who learned that grief and joy could coexist, that loss did not have to mean the end of happiness. And Thomas Sullivan, the cowboy who had stopped to help a weeping stranger and found the love of his life. The Sullivan family continued to thrive, generation after generation carrying forward the values that Thomas and Clara had instilled. The importance of family, the power of love to heal, the necessity of facing grief head-on rather than running from it, and above all, the promise that no one should ever have to mourn alone. On warm summer evenings, you could sometimes find Sullivan descendants visiting the 3 graves under the oak tree, bringing flowers and telling stories, making sure that the love story that began with tears and a cowboy's promise would never be forgotten. The tale of how Thomas found Clara weeping and promised she would never mourn alone again became family legend, passed down through the years as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, love can find us and lead us back to the light. And if you listened carefully on those summer evenings, standing quietly beneath the branches of that old oak tree, you might almost hear the whisper of 3 souls at peace, their earthly struggles long over, their love eternal and their promise kept forever.